But let's get into our final recaps from the Ole Miss game, our top 5, bottom 5. You started last week. I'll start this week. I'll start with the bottom 5. My number 1 on the bottom 5 was the play calling. Especially Mizell didn't have a single catch that game. I feel like we need to get Mizell more involved in the offense, whether it's through sweep motions. Badger got a sweep that worked really well for 15, 20 yards. I think Mizell also needs to be a person that gets more of those sweep plays. And I also feel like we got really conservative in the end of that game, the play call. I would really like to see Billy just go for the win. He trusts the defense, and it's the defense came through, and they've came through really. The LSU game as well. So, yeah, I give him credit for respecting and trusting the defense. But ideally, he wants to end it with the offense. And you want Lagway to just let him throw the ball. 3rd and 4, that with 1:12 left on the clock would have ended the game. You got to trust Lagway, maybe roll out to the right, and just make that game-winning play.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think I will point out that's something they actually, Greg McElroy mentioned on the broadcast and made a good point that they probably didn't do something like that because Lagway's still not 100%, doesn't really have the green light to move outside the pocket like that. So I get that to an extent, but I agree with the overall criticism of the play calling. It hasn't cost you, obviously, in these last 2 games because you've been able to win. But I Billy winning games and the offense having success is so dependent on being able to run the ball consistently and being able to hit big plays at a fairly high clip. If those things aren't happening, that they really don't have much else they can throw at you. Nothing that's happened in the last 2 games, even though it's changed my opinion of Billy Napier, the head coach, hasn't really changed my opinion a ton of Billy Napier, the play caller. Yeah, I still think that, he hasn't proven that he's good enough to continue to do it as a head coach, which really only the best of the best do. Not many coaches do that.
Definitely, I think he's a solid play caller. Maybe just as a play caller, he'd be better. But I do think we need to hire a full-time play caller.
I agree. Especially when you look at the other issues that we have operationally still. And we'll get more into that later, I'm sure. Leading off my bottom 5, I'll be honest here. Coming up with my bottom 5 was I kind of had to reach for a few, to be honest, because there really just weren't a ton of negatives to talk about yesterday. So I'll start with 1. I'll get my biggest reach out of the way first, but it's something that wasn't really even had anything to do with on the field, but more just the state of the program over the weekend. I kind of feel like, and if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong on this, feel free to tell me otherwise. I feel like they kind of lost a bit of momentum on the recruiting trail this weekend. I don't feel like this weekend necessarily was the huge event that it could have been when you look at kind of the relationships and the guys they were pushing for just this time a week ago.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys kind of went and visited, the schools they're committed to or just elsewhere.
I will add on. So the big names we're talking about really Jaime French, Solomon Thomas, Myron Charles, Dallas Wilson. So Wilson, I don't think went anywhere. That was kind of just his personal decision. And then French and Myron Charles went to Texas, which they're both committed to right now. I think one thing that did hurt Florida a lot was playing at noon. And so both of them, I know. I think Dallas Wilson, or French, I know he had to play in Orlando, a night game in Orlando. In Orlando to Jacksonville is like a 4-hour drive.
So he's not getting 2.5, but yeah. Still,
is it? I guess it's because it's 2.5 is. Yeah. So he's probably not getting home until 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
and he's probably gonna stay up a bit, So yeah, he's probably not gonna be getting up until 9, 10 o'clock. Which at that point you have traffic to deal with in Gainesville. He's not getting into Gainesville until 12. So French, it's harder in Jacksonville to make it to those noon games. And then Texas, they had their game at 3:30. So you can hit that plane at 9 o'clock. Austin, has everything right there. So they can just get him into the stadium real easily. So I will say that does help affect it a bit. And Solomon Thomas visiting LSU, he wanted to take the LSU visit. I wouldn't say it necessarily helped LSU. The fans, if you saw, were chanting "Fire Kelly" during that game. So I don't know if that really helped LSU. It could have helped us a lot, having him see us be a top 10 team. But I don't know if it's going to end up changing where he goes.
Yeah, and I'm not saying all is lost on the recruiting trail. I guess I'm just more, I feel like these 2 weeks with what you had on campus last week and guys that you thought were
Mm-hmm.
maybe going to be on campus this weekend, it could have been a huge, just shot of energy into the recruiting. And I don't know if we necessarily got that, though there is still a chance to close strong the next week and a half.
Definitely. I mean, we have signing day up in 10 days, the 4th, December 4th. So we're going to have a show then, assuming the Gators have a good signing day. So we definitely still have a little bit of time. And at this point, I'm not sure getting them players that have already been on campus is going to be the difference. Because I think really they saw everything against LSU, the atmosphere, the crowd getting into it. The result against Ole Miss, I think, would be enough not enough, but I don't know if it changes what they think. So being at the game versus not being at the game, I don't think hurts them. But
yeah, and I mean, maybe that's fair.
Let's get into our top 5. I'm going to go to clutch factor. I mean, when DJ Lagway's on the field, I mean, he just has it to close a game. I mean, you look at the Tennessee game we lost, but he sent us to overtime. We didn't win that one. But then you look at the Kentucky game, that's a 2-score game in the fourth quarter. He ends up making a deep throw with like 5 minutes left to go up 21 points. Or that would lead to a touchdown run to go up 21 points, which sealed the game that was mostly already over. But, he's clutch enough to end it. And then you look at the LSU game. That's a tied game going into the fourth quarter. Makes the big throw to Badger to go up score. And then he's the one who's making that call to ball. So that put us up 11 points. So, and then this Ole Miss game, tied game again in the fourth quarter, makes a big pass to DK. Was that in the fourth quarter? I think it was, right?
I think so.
So he makes that big throw to DK, and then it leads. No, that was a different one because then Montreal Johnson runs it in. But I mean, because I'm not exactly sure, but still,
that was the touchdown to go ahead. Was the Montreal one? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, still, he's leading that drive that takes us down the field to take the lead. And I mean, what we didn't see last year in games against like FSU, Missouri, and Arkansas was us win those close games. I mean, now in those close games, Lagway is almost batting 100%. 1,000.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Just continuing to make plays like we've talked about. I think our offense has limitations right now. I don't think it's as efficient as I would like it to be, or as varied. But yeah, they've made the plays when it matters for sure on both sides of the ball, really.
Okay, chat confirmed that it was the DK pass was in the fourth quarter. So I think the DK pass led to the Montreal Johnson run.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that.
Yeah. But going on to my top 5, I've got a player here in the number 5 spot. I got Bryce Thornton. We've talked a lot about the safety position and the fact that we think it's a need going into the offseason. And while that's probably still the case, he was fantastic in this game all over the place. I mean, obviously the 2 interceptions in the final 2 minutes to seal the game, but also 14 tackles, career high for him there, led the team. Like, just making plays all over the field. Like, just another young guy that they, continue to just see take steps forward. Like, it's guys like that I think are really why, obviously, in addition to what we've seen from Lagway, like why you can maybe sell yourself on being optimistic about where this is heading.
Absolutely. About Bryce Thornton. I mean, we talked about it a bit last night, and I said, could he be a team that could start for us, a player that could start for us at safety next year? Because I know I've been adamant that we need to get like 2 or 3 safeties in the room, especially at least one big name. Could Thornton start alongside that other safety? We don't know what's going to happen with Austin Turner because that's where Thornton is starting. Because, I mean, if Turner wants a medical red shirt, he can probably get one. But maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's ready to move on.
We also don't know like how capable he barely played. So I don't know if he's someone you can count on either way.
Also,
like, if he's there and he's a body, that's nice. But
so yeah, that's also true. So I mean, I do wonder if Osla does come back, or so if Thornton can step up, led the team in tackles in the game. So go right there. My number 4 and my bottom 4. So this doesn't necessarily be has to be a negative, but you said you were really struggling for the bottom 5. Yeah. So we only had 4 players catch a pass yesterday. DK with 3, Badger with 5, and then 1 for each of Ball, which was a touchdown pass, and Jaquavian Frazier's, which was a big 3rd down conversion. you would really like to see the offense spread out a bit more, I think. As I already said with my bottom five, Mizell, he needs to get into action a bit more. I would like to see a bit more Tank Hawkins. I think with no Trey Wilson, Hawkins can. I feel like we do have good players with the ball, but Tank, I wanted to see him get more experience. So I would love to see him get there more. But I mean, only 4 players catching passes, and 2 of those guys, 3 of them, aren't going to be on the team next year.
Yeah.
So I do trust that our receivers next season we're going to have developed or the transfer portal. So I do trust that, but we definitely do need to get more players to get the ball in their hands.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad that you brought that up because like that is, if there's like one thing that is kind of nagging at me, even though I'm a lot more optimistic about the state of the program than I was a couple weeks ago. Like if there's one thing that does concern me about, especially the state of the roster next year, it's the questions at the receiver position. You know, like you said, all these guys that are producing for us for the most part are gone. Trey, we'll see what happens there. I mean, maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. I don't know if you can count on that. But I don't like that you're not seeing guys like Mizell or, you know, a guy like Andy Jean or Tank Hawkins, like you said. Like the fact that none of these guys are really stepping up and getting any looks doesn't make you feel great about the state of things. Like it kind of just hammers home how important it's going to be to land a portal receiver, especially if you don't close with either of these top receivers that you're looking at the high school level. I
will say that, I mean, we do know Ole Miss has one of the best defenses in the country.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you can make that, but like still, I at least like to see Mizell get some designed plays. But get into your top 5, your number 3.
Yeah, number 4 number 4 on my bottom.
Yeah,
yeah.
Skipping you.
Yeah. So I got the injury to Aaron Gates happened right on the opening drive. You know, obviously not too costly in this game and maybe not going to be too costly, you know, moving forward because I don't think you need Aaron Gates to beat FSU. Probably don't need him in the bowl game if it's that serious. We don't really know yet. Looked like a knee injury. I mean, don't love that, but we don't really know the severity at this point. It's just honestly like more than like it's a big negative for the team. It's just a bummer because he's been playing really well. Like it's been fun to see him getting out on the field and getting some reps. You know, a guy that looks like you're going to potentially be able to count on in the future. Would have been nice to see him, you know, like again, maybe he plays on Saturday. I don't know. We haven't really heard. We'll probably just have to wait till Wednesday for clarity there. But it's just a bummer because, you know, a guy that was playing really well didn't get to see him beyond just a couple plays.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's an ACL thing. Same ACL he hurt in high school, I believe his junior year, which really stunted his like ranking for as out of high school. So I mean that's nothing official. I mean, I assume someone will ask Napier tomorrow at the press conference. So hopefully he can come back, but I doubt it at this point, especially because we probably don't need him for to be FSU or the bowl opponent. So Denson also played decently well in that game. Had a big hit at the end there. That's the good thing with having a good back. I mean, both these guys, same class, and they're both getting a lot of playing time. So, I mean, that's why you got to recruit. To get on to my top 5, my number 3, I mean, after the Tennessee game, I think a lot of people – was it Tennessee game? Trey Smack's my number 3. He had another 53-yard field goal in this game. I mean, he has – when's the last time he missed a field goal? Do you count the bad snap against Georgia?
Probably nah, I would say probably not.
So, and then I think he missed one against Tennessee.
But the one he missed against Tennessee was that was like the fire drill field goal situation.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, when Trey Smack is making field goals, we're winning games. I mean, it's a weird correlation that I've noticed. And he had a 53-yarder against Ole Miss. I mean, when we got our kicker commit flipped from Arkansas a couple weeks ago, I was thinking he's going to be starting next year because Smack had been struggling at that point. But no, I mean, assuming Smack doesn't go to the NFL, he's in his junior season now. So assuming Smack doesn't go to the NFL, Smack might be one of the best returning kickers in all of college football next year. I mean, he might be one of the best this year too. So I'm really excited that Smack is turning it on now, and we have a reliable kicker to go to.
Yeah, kicking game something that certainly can be taken for granted. And like, you know, just a couple of years ago, we were having, I mean, before Smack became the starter, it was a serious concern. Like, you didn't trust
Mhm.
kicking field goals even inside 40 yards sometimes.
No.
So yeah, I don't think that can be understated, especially when, actually we've been fairly, like, I don't want to say we're not efficient in the red zone, because we actually have been fairly efficient in the red zone. It's more about getting down there. We haven't always been able to do.
Yeah.
So, like, it's really nice that in situations like that long kick he made yesterday, where we kind of just get the ball in good field position, but aren't really able to push it. It's so nice to be able to have that.
Absolutely.
But getting into my the next one on my top 5, I've got the third down and red zone efficiency, kind of going off what I was just saying, really on offensive and defensive, because offensively 7 to 15 on third downs, that's more than solid. Held them to 3 of 14, which is a lot better than the mark LSU had last week. And then, also I would add into that pretty good on fourth downs too. Stopped them twice on fourth downs.
We did.
And then they were 0 of 3 in the red zone. Florida was 2 of 2. Like, in a game that, where they arguably like outplayed you down to down, and the game that really came down to who took advantage of the most opportunities, I think it's incredibly clear which side did, and that's the side that won the game.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that, but like, they did beat you on the down for down basis, but then in the red zone and third downs and fourth downs, they were coming up clutch. I mean, so I guess I was wrong last night when I was saying that Piez didn't successfully get those plays against Oklahoma, because apparently they were like 100% on those like fourth downs and like goal line plays with Piez.
I heard that today too.
So, I mean, that's even more impressive for the Gators.
Yeah.
Very good stuff. You've seen the D-line and in the red zone play a lot better this season. Saw it against Georgia, Kentucky when we got that goal line stand. LSU, we've seen the short yardage plays. They haven't been able to get them. It's like the defense is better in third and 1 and third and short than it is at like third and long, which does make a little bit of sense from other things, like the DB injuries and stuff. So getting onto my bottom 5, my third thing, the whole third quarter, I mean, the defense played well. There is that. We got 1 yard in the third quarter, and we scored 3 points, but that was only because Ole Miss muffed the punt. We got 1 yard after that, after the muffed punt, which thankfully Smack hit the 53-yard field goal.
Yeah.
But like, yes, this is like the best defense maybe the best defense in the country. I mean, I feel like the play calling, like, they couldn't really block anybody. Maybe that's when you should be going to like Aiden Mizell on end around plays that maybe they don't work for 5+ yards, but maybe it gets you like 3 yards there. I mean, it can at least boost something, because the offense was doing nothing in the third quarter. And it's like I mentioned last week with LSU, there was a time at like the middle of the second quarter to like the end of the third quarter where it was kind of boring watching the offense play, because they weren't doing anything. But then they do step it up to end the game, and they do end up winning.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of ties back into like what I was saying earlier about my issues with the play calling. Like, the reason it's working better right now is because Lagway can hit those big plays at a higher rate than Graham Mertz could. But, and Florida in this game had to run the ball. Really, it was a volume game for the Gators. Ran the ball 43 times, or 39 times, something like that. Total handed the ball off. So like, yeah, I think this team really, and maybe it's a Lagway thing too. Maybe it's partially just Lagway not having the full grasp of the whole playbook yet. But right now there just is not. There's not a ton of variety right now. Yeah, and the mobility, sure, I'm sure that's hurting things also. Can't discount that.
Yeah.
For my bottom 5, next up, I've got the way they were the containment of Jackson Dart, or the lack thereof. The run defense really held up pretty well in this game. They didn't run the ball very successfully, but most of their production came from Jackson Dart. Now, granted, a lot of that was on a 35-yard run on a drive that didn't actually lead to anything. They ultimately ended up punting on that drive. But he still was breaking off a lot of runs, scrambling for first downs or near first downs, giving them good yardage on first down, which is frustrating against a team like Ole Miss that is going to be very aggressive on short yardage fourth downs. I mean, Lane went for 4, and again, like we said last night, it felt like even more than that. So it's a little frustrating that they didn't do as good of a job, containing him. He went for 71 yards on 14 carries, I believe. But I will say, in fairness, you got Pup Howard out and 2 young linebackers in there too. So I'm sure that makes things makes things harder.
Yeah.
But still something that was a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I have that a little bit later on, so I'm going to pocket that for now. I'm going to get on to my top 5, my number 2. The defensive game plan. Talked about it last week again with LSU. We're shorthanded in the DB room. We know we can't, and I don't know if those guys are good enough to cover one-on-one. I mean, we did really only give up the one explosive play to Trey Harris, which was over Thornton, and I'm not sure the corner that was in play. I mean, honestly, Thornton only being one step behind Trey Harris right there, that's kind of impressive. So, but like the defensive game plan, we let him get some short yardage, short plays, get like 8, 5, 10 yards on those check down plays. But then when they got in scoring position, 0 for 3 in the red zone, they missed a field goal, and we just kept getting good enough stops to where even though Dart had 400 yards of offense on his own, only resulted in 17 points. I mean, I said going into the game, that had to be the game plan, and that's exactly what they did. Now, whether that's the game plan just for anybody we play, or if that's just going to be the game plan for when we play teams with good weapons, like LSU and like Ole Miss. So we look back at the Texas game, didn't really works. So wouldn't say that was necessarily the game plan for them. So, I mean, the defensive staff, you got to give them a lot of credit. They know what this team can and can't do. They're sticking with it, and they're focusing on their strengths. And we're holding teams to less than 20 points. I mean, besides Texas. So it's like, you look back, LSU 16 points, Ole Miss 17 points. Georgia did have 34. One of those came off of a pick. And then, the defense was on the field the entire game, basically, when Warner was in there. So, 24 points if you don't include the pick. And then maybe less if Lagway stays in that game. Then you go back to Tennessee. Before overtime, 17 points. Kentucky, 20 points. And UCF, 13 points. So it's like the defense is playing. Maybe give up yards, but bend, don't break, and it's working to a perfection.
Yeah, I think you summed it all up pretty well there. Defense hasn't been perfect, giving up a decent amount of yards last week and this week, but not a lot of points, 16 and 17. So, doing enough, I would say for sure. Like the defense is the reason why you've won these 2 games, in spite of the fact that they are still giving up some big plays. Although, outside of that one to Trey Harris, nothing huge. It was a lot more dink and dunk beyond that play. But yeah. Next. Sorry.
Sorry. I was going to try to figure out what the points per game difference is, because I was looking at it. Florida's defense is like 101st in yards per game. But I wonder what our defensive points per game is, because that's going to be a lot lower.
Yeah, definitely skewed by Texas, but still.
It's Texas, the Miami game. Yeah. Maybe the A&M, but only 33, and one was a pick 6. So, even against A&M defense, they got settled in, so against A&M.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I can't find these.
Yeah. Next up with my top 5, I got Montreal Johnson, man. A lot of people were not happy to see Montreal starting this game, which, I get it, because Jaden Baugh has been playing really well. And I do think Montreal early in the game did look a little bit banged up, a little slow, kind of took them a minute to get going. But, really settled in and ended up being Florida's most effective and efficient back on the day, across the 100-yard mark on 18 carries, had the touchdown on that nifty play out of the Wildcat formation, and just a really nice game for a guy who is probably still playing through at least a decent amount of pain. Probably not completely at 100% at this point.
Yeah, Montreal Johnson. I was one of the few people defending Montreal Johnson in chats and stuff. And I was like, hey, remember that Tennessee game? Everyone else, Ball, Jackson, they weren't really doing anything. Montreal Johnson was cooking them. And if Montreal Johnson doesn't get hurt, that might be the difference in a win against Tennessee as well. So, you got to give Montreal a lot of credit. Probably, he is playing his last 2 games of college football now against FSU. Hopefully he plays the bowl game. But I'd love to see him tear it up against FSU. And, I'm excited for it, because I hope he gets a chance in the NFL. I think he's a solid running back. Maybe he doesn't do one thing extremely well, but he's solid really everywhere around. Decent speed, can catch out the backfield, can block, good vision. I think he's someone that you can see just stick on a roster. If injuries happen, maybe he gets a game here and there. So I'm really excited to see what Montreal does in the future.
For sure.
So then getting on to my bottom 5, my number 4, you just mentioned it. It was tackling Jackson Dart. I mean, it wasn't even necessarily that the plays weren't there to make on Dart to where those scrambles were just wide open. He has all the green grass in front of him. No, he was evading sacks. I talked about it last night. He was getting low and just going under the tackles, and it was really working because we were trying to tackle high. And so I got to give Dart some credit there as well. But, I mean, we got to finish on some of these sacks. There was almost another one where he did trip, because he had to juke out a defensive lineman because we brought pressure, and he slid left, had a lineman there, so he tries to cut right but slips there, so it counts as a sack. If he doesn't slip there, that's probably a first down run, which I'm pretty sure on that drive they ended up having to punt, or that's where they kicked a field goal. So they kicked a field goal there. So I mean, that could have been a difference between a touchdown for them and 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, I already talked about this, so I don't really have a ton more to add to that. All I would say is, luckily, that's not really an element of Luke Kromenhoek's game that I think we have to worry too much about next week, from what I have seen. So hopefully we'll be all right in that regard. Next up in my bottom 5, though, I've got something we talked about a little bit. We talked about it last night for sure. It's the game management. I still I don't completely get what Billy's doing at a lot of times in these games. The situations that come to mind, like you talked about one of them, the lack of aggressiveness on that final drive, like the thing we did right before the half where we called the timeout just to run the ball again. Like I just don't completely get what we're doing. His aggression doesn't always match the situation in either direction. Like sometimes he's more so aggressive. I'm like, what are we doing here? Sometimes it's, hey, let's go win. Let's go ice this game. We're a 5-loss team, and they just aren't going to do it. Calling timeouts at confusing times. Don't think we had any major procedural penalties in this game, if I remember correctly.
No.
So yeah, nothing too bad in that regard, but just things that continue to be a problem. And it's why, again, I'm in on 2025 for Billy. These are things that need to get cleaned up, because my biggest concern right now is, even if he's capable of winning these games, you're still going to lose 3 or 4 a year because you just slip up, and these things ultimately will cost you.
Yeah, they definitely could cost us. And I mean, that cost us, if we go 10-2, or we're about to go 10-2, and then one of those penalties hit and we go 9-3, could just end up like Ole Miss, missed a playoff by 1 game.
Yeah.
So we really got to fix that one up and get ready for it. But getting on to my top 5, my number 1 thing, I got to give it to the defense, man. The D-line, really. 4 sacks in that game. What do I have written here? D-line. I'm not sure what that's supposed to say, but yeah, I mean, they had 4 sacks in this game. Stop it. Oh, that's it. I was actually wanting to mention this earlier. Outside of Jackson Dart, Ole Miss had 70 rushing yards. I mean, they ran the ball a good amount of times. But, they had 70 rushing yards outside of Jackson Dart. I mean, 141 with Dart. So he had over half of the rushing yards. I mean, this defensive line, when you compare it to the beginning of the season, where Miami ran for 150, something like that, 160, I think, on us. And then A&M, Marcel Reed ran all over us. And then, I mean, Le'Veon Moss was a good running back, too. He's top 3 in the SEC before injuries. But, still, when you look at that, Mississippi State even ran successfully a bit on us, too, before that bye week. So I definitely am really impressed with how much the run defense has improved. And it definitely is showing in those short yardage situations. I mean, Caleb Banks, he's going to be getting that he's going to be getting a lot of drop hype. Don't know if he's going to get to that first round spot, but second day 2 pick, which going from someone that no one knew. I mean, if you talk to scouts, I don't think any of them knew who Caleb Banks was before this season. If you talk to really any SEC coaches, they were not really worried about Caleb Banks coming into this season. But now he's being talked about with them. And Tyreek Sapp, he's becoming a good run defender too. The past 2 weeks, he has 3 TFLs on runs. he's figuring it out there. He's still getting sacks too. Get a sack in this past game. I mean, Sapp was a former top 100 recruit. I remember when he came on campus, he was already a monster, and he's kind of having that leadership role as well as being a devastating guy on the D-line. Cam Jackson as well. He had a big TFL in this game. Someone that I definitely think is going to end up being on an NFL roster, whether that's a free agency signing or he does get drafted on like the 4th, 3rd maybe round as well. Not sure his position there. Cam James also coming in to his own, as well as Jack Piper still being a really good run defender. So, I mean, and the thing is, it's not just seniors. So Banks and Cam Jackson are both going to be leaving. Likely Banks is going to be leaving. Jackson has already accepted that Senior Bowl invite. Sapp might come back. And, I mean, Caleb Banks, the guy behind him, we look at like a guy like Kelby Collins, maybe the best recruit from his recruiting class on our team. We haven't seen him at all really this year, but I'm going to trust him now to develop him like we've seen with Caleb Banks. And you have a talented guy like Kelby. I mean, he could be a monster for us in the next year or two.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of shoe mine in here because I agree. I'm the same. I have the defensive line atop my list of the top 5, and of all the things that like to me, the offense improving throughout the course of the season isn't really that surprising to me when you look at the fact that the 4 biggest, the 4 biggest names making plays outside of Montrell Johnson are all guys that weren't on the team last year, whether they're transfers in DK and Badger or true freshmen in Baugh and Lagway. You got a lot of guys that are literally gelling together, and the offensive line has multiple new starters too. So like they're all kind of, I think, coming into their own. That makes sense. I can't really tell you what's happened with the defensive line. It's a lot of guys that have been on this team for 2 years now or more. And this group they were like unplayably bad earlier in the year. I just being real, like that they were awful.
They were.
And they're now like, not only are they like good, but they're a strength. It looks like one of the best defensive fronts in the SEC. And I don't know where that came from, but the results are undeniable. I mean, Banks had a pair of sacks on yesterday. Sapp had 1, and then they split for another. So another half sack for each of them. Like guys making plays, like you said, Cameron James, guy that's making a lot of plays. Like they're all over the place. I don't know what happened. I mean, obviously got to give some credit to Gerald Chapman here, certainly, but just very impressive.
And I saw something last week against LSU. Florida played 16 different defensive linemen. Most teams play around 6, but not only did we play 14 defensive linemen, 10 of those guys graded above a 63 on PFF. And on PFF, 60 is really the baseline. If you're below a 60, you played non-positive football. Above a 60 is where you get to like that. You're making a contribution. So having 10 guys making positive contributions on the D-line, I mean, this D-line Gerald Chapman deserves all the credit in the world.
Yep, 100%.
Do you your last thing on top 5?
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, so sorry, I got confused there for a second. So that was actually my number 1, but I had as my number 2. I had DJ Lagway, who okay. I still think like, I mean, if you look at the numbers, they're not going to blow you away. Last week that wasn't the case either. But I mean, man, he's so special. I mean, just the throws he makes with guys draped over him, his vision, especially like, knowing that a lot of our offensive production has to come from those deep balls. Like he's willing to throw them. He's willing to take the chances, and it's paying off a lot. And, a lot of his misses are like either like near misses or like balls the guy like frankly should have caught.
That pick. I mean, not a perfect throw, but like, I mean, you would hope DK would at least catch. I mean, come down close to coming down with it. Maybe drop it as he's falling down so it's not picked.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just think he looks like he's getting better every week. Mm-hmm. He's doing exactly what you'd want to see from a young quarterback. Like, I mean, frankly, and like this isn't a shot at Graham Mertz or anything, who was more than capable, but like I just can't help but wonder what would have happened if Lagway had been starting if he had just been given the start in Texas A&M and let run from there, just because of how much he's getting better every week and where he's gotten in just 4 games as a starter, 5.
Samford. So he had Samford, Kentucky, Georgia. So
it's 5 because 5.
It's 5. Yeah.
If you count Georgia, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, DJ Lagway is special, man. He's going to be maybe the Heisman favorite going into next year.
Maybe.
Because, like, you look at all the favorites right now. I mean, Travis Hunter already announced he's going NFL. Shadur's going to go to the NFL. Cam Ward's going. Dylan Gabriel's going. Ashton Jeans, he's going. All those guys are leaving. The top returning quarterbacks who are, like, proven, is like Drew Aller.
Garrett Nussmeier.
Like, if he's even at LSU. Well, because, I mean.
I think he'll come back. I think at this point he'll probably come back, but we'll see.
And
wouldn't be shocked if he didn't, but I'd probably bet that he would.
Maybe like the biggest sneaky one, like not necessarily like maybe a bit under the radar, Jordan Maiva at USC. I think he's going to be pretty good for them.
I wonder if he's actually their quarterback next year. I'm a little curious. I mean, we'll see. I'm curious if they go portal shopping on that again.
I mean, we're having so much fun talking about a top 10 win. We've gone for over 30 minutes on this. Oh my goodness. So let's get into we're not even done yet. We still have our last our bottom 5.
Yeah, let's get through this pretty quickly.
I have
you want to lead us off? Yeah.
The clock management. The end of the game, I already talked about with the play calling. He was just running out the clock, which I guess it's like the neutral thing to do. It's not necessarily a wrong thing to do. But I mean, I feel like when you have the guy like DJ Lagway, you're gonna trust him to get that first down to end the game, or you're gonna trust him to not make a dumb mistake. I mean, he is a freshman, but have we ever really seen Lagway make freshman mistakes? Like, even his interceptions, it's like he just hasn't been making freshman mistakes. It's really surprising. But also at the end of the half, like, it's not necessarily a negative or a positive what we did where we just called the timeout. So, like, it didn't really affect the outcome of the game. But, like, you got to make a decision because we kind of just wasted, like, an extra 5 minutes just for nothing. Yeah. And, I mean, if you're going to go for it, at least go for it. So, I mean, indecisiveness from Napier, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of already talked about this, so I'm not going to add a ton. I will also point out at the end of the game, we were sort of running clock, but like not completely. Like we were snapping the ball with like 12 seconds left.
Were we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about when there was like 4-ish minutes, 5 minutes left in the game, where it's like not necessarily in full run the clock territory, but that's also like we were running a conservative game plan, so it's not like, you know, if you're doing that, you might as well drain some clock too. There's a lot of things. Like, I just continue to question it. I feel like it's not Billy's strong suit.
Which is why we kind of need an OC.
Yeah. For my next in the bottom 5, and I'll even admit that it was a mixed bag. Like, there were certainly positives as we've talked about, but I've still got the depleted secondary. I mean, I think it's still pretty clearly the weakness of this team right now. I think they're winning in spite of it. And then plus, you know, obviously Bryce Thornton makes a couple huge plays there. Dijon almost makes a big one to end it. You know, it still seems like an issue. You know, LSU punished you a little bit. They don't quite have the weapons, and I don't think Nussmeier is as good as Dart. So LSU wasn't able to punish you quite as much. Ole Miss did. I mean, they still put up more than 460 yards of offense in this game, most of that through the air. So, you know, it's a concern. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the Texas game, and that's why they ultimately won. But it's a concern. Luckily, again, as most of these concerns we're going to talk about, doesn't really worry me that much against FSU. No,
they do not. But, yeah, I didn't want to hate on the secondary because, I mean, we did only give up 17 points to a top 5, top 10 QB in college football. Trey Harris did get hurt in the second quarter, but, like, they still have guys like Juice Wells, Caden Lee, Aiden Williams. So it's like, I mean, they still played.
Juice Wells was kind of MIA yesterday.
He's been MIA all season. I mean, I saw on Twitter, you had Ole Miss fans complaining about how much you're paying Juice Wells and for what he's done. Yeah. I mean, I think he has like 400, 500 yards on the season, which for a guy that they were expecting to be a top 5, top 3 receiver in the SEC, now he's maybe wide receiver 4 on their team.
Yeah.
I mean, with like Justin Watkins, I can't forget him either. And I mean, kind of a bust. Like we saw it with him at South Carolina as well. He was good, but like wasn't really an elite player for them.